June 2001, a Honda R&D facility in Tochigi, Japan. Senior engineer Takashi Haraguchi stands before a dyno cell watching a new 2.4-liter four-cylinder complete its final validation run. The K24A, Honda's answer to the question nobody was asking. What comes after the K20? Behind him, executives are reviewing cost analyses, production schedules, market positioning. The K24 is supposed to be the torque motor, the family car engine, the practical choice for Accords and CR-Vs, not a performance engine. That's what the K20 is for. One engineer breaks the silence. Sir, the K24 just made 241 horsepower in final testing. That's more than the K20A Type S. Haraguchi doesn't look surprised. Expected. The displacement advantage gives us more torque and fills in the power band. But we're not advertising that number. Why not? This could be our best engine yet. Haraguchi turns to face the room. Because management has already decided the K24 is a truck engine. It goes in Accords, CR-Vs, Elements, family vehicles. If we start talking about 240 plus horsepower, customers will expect Type R pricing, will cannibalize K20 sales, and worse, will confuse the product lineup. But the K24 could be... I know what it could be, Haraguchi interrupts. I know exactly what it could be. But what it will be is a 160 horsepower family car engine, because that's what corporate wants. The K24's potential stays in this room. This is the story of the K24, the engine Honda built to be boring and practical, that accidentally became the ultimate naturally aspirated tuner motor. And why Honda spent 15 years pretending they didn't know what they'd created, while enthusiasts built 400 horsepower, naturally aspirated monsters that rewrote the rules of four-cylinder performance. The problem Honda created for themselves. To understand the K24, you need to understand Honda's predicament in the early 2000s. They'd just released the K20, a technological masterpiece that made up to 220 horsepower, naturally aspirated. The enthusiast community loved it. Automotive journalists praised it. But there was a problem. The K20 was expensive to manufacture. All that precision engineering, the CNC ported heads, the individual quality control, it cost money. And Honda needed an engine for their volume models. The Accord, the CR-V, the Element. These weren't enthusiast vehicles, they were transportation appliances for families who wanted reliability and space. They didn't need 220 horsepower and 8,200 RPM redlines. They needed torque at low RPM and good fuel economy. So Honda made a decision that would accidentally create their greatest sleeper engine. They'd take the K20 architecture, increase displacement to 2.4 liters for more torque, then detune it for mainstream applications. The logic was sound. Bigger displacement meant more torque without high RPM heroics. Better drivability for normal people. Lower manufacturing costs because you didn't need the K20's extreme precision at lower power outputs. The K24 would be everything the K20 wasn't. Torquey instead of peaky. Smooth instead of aggressive. Practical instead of exciting. But Honda's engineers, being Honda engineers, couldn't help themselves. They'd spent years perfecting the K-series architecture. They knew how to make it breathe, how to optimize combustion, how to extract maximum efficiency. So even when building a detuned family car engine, they built it to the same obsessive standards as the K20. And in doing so, they accidentally created something extraordinary. The engine built with hidden potential. When Honda's engineers designed the K24 in 2000 to 2001, they started with the K20's proven architecture, but made key changes for the torque-focused application. The displacement increased from 2.0 to 2.4 liters through a longer stroke. The K20's 86mm stroke became 99mm in the K24. The bore remained similar at 87mm. This long stroke design prioritized torque over high RPM power. The cylinder head was based on the K20, but with revised port geometry optimized for mid-range flow rather than high RPM breathing. The compression ratio was lowered from the K20's 11.5 to 1 to a more pump gas-friendly 9.7 to 1 in base models. But here's what Honda didn't advertise. The K24's block was actually stronger than the K20's. The longer stroke required a taller deck height, which meant more material in the cylinder walls. The increased displacement meant thicker cylinder walls to handle the larger bore and stroke combination. And the bottom end. The K24's crankshaft was forged steel, just like the K20, but it was heavier, designed to handle the increased rotating mass from the longer stroke. The connecting rods were slightly longer and proportionally stronger. In other words, Honda had built a K20 with more displacement and a stronger foundation. Then they deliberately limited it by using mild camshafts and conservative tuning. The base K24A made 160 horsepower, adequate for a family sedan, uninspiring for enthusiasts. But underneath that conservative tune was an engine that could make much, much more. During development testing, Honda had built several K24 variants to explore the architecture's potential. One prototype, never mentioned in public documents but leaked years later, made 276 horsepower, naturally aspirated at 7,800 RPM. That's more than the K20A's 220 horsepower, from an engine Honda was marketing as a family car motor. The information was classified, buried alongside the K20 full potential documents. Because Honda didn't want anyone knowing, their Accord engine could make 276 horsepower with the right parts. The TSX that showed Honda's hand. In 2003, Honda released the Acura TSX, a sports sedan designed to compete with the BMW 3 Series and Audi A4, and under the hood was a K24A2 making 200 horsepower. Enthusiasts immediately noticed something interesting. This wasn't a detuned economy engine. This was a K24 with serious potential. The K24A2 used a high compression version of the block with better breathing. It revved to 7,000 RPM, made 200 horsepower at 7,000 RPM, and 166 pound-feet of torque at 4,500 RPM. That torqueway number was key. The K20A Type S made 152 pound-feet. The K24A2 made 14 pound-feet more with a flatter torquey curve. It felt stronger everywhere. Tuners started experimenting. A cold air intake and exhaust unlocked 210 horsepower. Add a tune, and you were at 220. The gains were linear and reliable. Then someone did something clever. They swapped a K20A2 cylinder head, which had better high RPM breathing, onto a K24A2 block. The combination became known as a K24/K20 Frankenstein motor. The result was shocking. 240 horsepower naturally aspirated, with pump gas, no turbo, no supercharger, just displacement meeting head flow. And that was just the beginning. By 2005, the K24/K20 hybrid build had become the go-to, naturally aspirated setup for Honda enthusiasts. People were making 260, 270, even 280 horsepower, naturally aspirated with aggressive cams and individual throttle bodies. Honda watched this happen in real time and said nothing, because acknowledging the K24's potential meant admitting they'd built a performance engine and hidden it in family cars. The Frankenstein that became legend. The K24/K20 hybrid build deserves its own story, because it represents everything brilliant about Honda's K-Series and everything frustrating about Honda's refusal to build it themselves. The concept was elegant. Take the K24's displacement and torque, add the K20's high-flowing cylinder head, combine the best of both engines into one package. In practice, the swap was relatively simple. The blocks were compatible. The head bolt patterns matched. You needed custom head gaskets and some minor modifications, but nothing insurmountable for a competent shop. The result was the ultimate naturally aspirated Honda engine. The K24 bottom end provided 2.4 liters of displacement and strong low-end torque. The K20 head provided high RPM breathing and aggressive cam profiles. Built properly with the right combination of parts, these engines made 270 to 290 horsepower naturally aspirated, rev to 8,500 RPM, pull hard from 3,000 RPM all the way to redline. By 2008, the K24/K20 hybrid had become so popular that companies started offering complete swap kits. Skunk 2, Honda, and K-Tuned developed parts specifically for this combination. The aftermarket had essentially finished the engine Honda refused to build. And the cost? A complete K24/K20 hybrid build, including machining, parts, and labor, cost $8,000 to $12,000. That's less than what Honda charged for the factory K20A Type R. Enthusiasts could build a more powerful engine than Honda's flagship for less money using Honda's own parts. The irony was perfect. The turbo revelation nobody expected. But the 24's real potential didn't fully emerge until people started turbocharging it. And what they discovered changed everything. The K20, for all its high RPM glory, had limitations under boost. The small displacement meant it needed high RPM to make power, and the high compression pistons weren't boost-friendly. Building a K20 for serious turbo power required expensive internal modifications. The K24 was different. The longer stroke meant more torques at lower RPM. The larger displacement meant boost created more pressure on more volume, which equals more power. And many K24 variants came with lower compression pistons from the factory, perfect for boost. Early turbo K24 builds revealed something shocking. The engine could handle 400 horsepower on completely stock internals. No forged pistons, no upgraded rods, just a turbo, supporting modifications, and a good tune. Push to 500 horsepower, and you'd eventually need head studs and a better head gasket. But the bottom end, still stock. The K24's overbuilt block and forged crank could handle power levels that would grenade a K20. By 2010, built K24 turbo engines were making 700 to 800 horsepower. The engine Honda built for Accords and CR-Vs was competing with two JZs and RB26 in the Power Wars. And the response curve was better. The K24's displacement gave it less turbo lag than smaller engines. Boost came on sooner and harder. The power delivery was more usable. The K24 had accidentally become the ultimate turbo four-cylinder, not because Honda designed it that way, but because they'd over-engineered a family car engine to Honda standards, which meant it was accidentally bulletproof. The Type S Honda refused to build. In 2007, Acura released the RDX, a compact crossover SUV with a turbocharged K23A1, making 240 horsepower, close to the K24, but technically a different engine code due to minor variations. Enthusiasts looked at this and asked the obvious question: why doesn't Honda build a turbocharged K24 sports car? The engine existed, the turbo technology existed. Honda had proven they could make a turbocharged K-series that met emission standards. All they needed to do was put it in a Civic or Integra. But Honda refused. Their official position was that turbocharged engines didn't align with Honda's naturally aspirated performance philosophy. They'd built their reputation on high-revving VTEC engines. Turbocharging would dilute the brand. This position became increasingly absurd as every competitor moved to turbocharging. The Volkswagen Golf GTI, the Ford Focus ST, even the Subaru WRX. All of them offered turbocharged performance in practical packages. Honda stubbornly stuck with naturally aspirated engines through the 2000s. The K20 in the Civic Si, the K24 in the Accord. Both good engines, but increasingly outdated compared to turbocharged competition. Meanwhile, the aftermarket was building exactly what enthusiasts wanted: turbocharged K24s making 350 to 400 horsepower in street-friendly Civics and Integras, proving that Honda could have built this product themselves if they'd wanted to. One former Honda engineer explained the reasoning. "We could have built a turbo K24 Civic Si making 300 horsepower. The engineering was straightforward, but marketing and product planning didn't want it. They said turbocharging would make Honda look like everyone else. So instead, we let our competitors beat us with technology we'd already mastered. And we let the aftermarket build the cars we should have built. It was frustrating." The Civic Si that should have been. In 2012, Honda finally released a K24-powered Civic Si, the K24 Z7, making 201 horsepower. Enthusiasts were excited. The K24's torques in a lightweight Civic should be amazing. Then they drove it, and the disappointment was palpable. The K24 Z7 felt soft. It made peak power at 7,000 RPM, but it didn't pull hard getting there. The torque was better than the K20, but not by much, and it didn't have the K20's urgent rev-happy character. Honda had deliberately tuned the personality out of it: conservative cams, mild compression, a tune that prioritized smoothness over excitement. They'd taken the K24's potential and buried it under layers of corporate compromise. Car and Driver wrote, "The Civic Si is quick but not exciting. It feels like a warm hatch trying to be a hot hatch." Enthusiasts were furious. They knew what the K24 could do. They'd built 270 horsepower, naturally aspirated K24s, and 400 horsepower turbo K24s. They knew Honda was deliberately holding back. And Honda's response was silence. No acknowledgement, no explanation. Just corporate messaging about balanced performance and daily drivability. The aftermarket stepped in immediately. Honda released tuning solutions. Companies offered cam upgrades. You could build the Civic Si Honda should have built for $3,000 to $5,000 in parts, which raised the obvious question: why didn't Honda just build it that way from the factory? The Accord Phi 6 problem. Here's the real reason Honda neutered the K24 in performance applications: the Accord V6. In the mid-2000s, Honda's Accord came in two flavors: the four-cylinder with the K24 making 166 to 190 horsepower, depending on year, and the V6 with the J35 making 240 to 268 horsepower. The V6 was the premium engine. It cost $3,000 to $4,000 more than the four-cylinder, and that premium was profitable. Buyers who wanted power paid extra for the V6. But if Honda released a K24 making 240 plus horsepower in the Civic Si or a hypothetical Accord Type S, who would buy the V6? Why pay $4,000 more for a heavier, less fuel-efficient engine that made the same power? Honda's product planners had backed themselves into a corner. They'd created an engine hierarchy where the K24 had to be limited to protect V6 sales. Internal documents from 2008, leaked years later, confirm this. A product planning memo stated, K24 variants must maintain clear separations from J35 V6 power outputs to preserve product differentiation and maintain profit margins. Translation: we're deliberately limiting the K24 so people buy the more expensive V6. Enthusiasts suspected this for years. The leaked document confirmed it. Honda was playing the same game they'd played with the K20, artificially limiting an engine to protect their product lineup. The turbo-era Honda fought against. By 2015, Honda couldn't ignore reality anymore. Turbocharged four cylinders had won. The market expected them. Fuel economy regulations required them. Competitors were dominating with them. So Honda finally released a turbocharged K-Series, the L15B7, a 1.5-liter turbo making 174 to 200 horsepower, depending on tune. And for performance applications, the FK8 Civic Type R got a 2.0-liter turbo making 306 horsepower. Enthusiasts noticed something interesting. That 2.0 turbo was essentially what they'd been building for a decade. A turbocharged K-Series with modern technology. Honda had finally built what the aftermarket had proven worked years earlier. But here's where it gets frustrating. Honda didn't turbocharge the K24. They developed new engines. The L15 and K20C1, the Civic Type R's engine, were different architectures with direct injection and modern turbo systems. Why not just turbocharge the K24? The engine enthusiasts had proven could make 400 to 800 horsepower reliably. Cost and emissions. The K24's port injection and older combustion chamber design couldn't meet modern emissions standards efficiently. Building a compliant turbo K24 would cost nearly as much as developing a new engine. So, Honda moved on. The K24 continued in naturally aspirated form in some models through the late 2000s, but development stopped. No turbo variant, no high-performance version, just a slow fade into obsolescence. The swap that saved the K24's legacy. But enthusiasts didn't let the K24 die. They kept building it, refining it, proving what it could do. Today, in 2024, the K24 is one of the most popular engine swaps in the world. It's dropped into everything. Honda Civics, obviously. But also Miatas, Toyota, MR2s, Lotus Elizas, even kit cars and hot rods. Why? Because the K24 offers a unique combination. More displacement than the K20 for better torque. Strong enough to handle boost. Light enough to not ruin the handling of lightweight cars. And reliable enough to daily drive while making serious power. A K24 swap into a Miata creates a 2,400-pound car with 200 to 250 naturally aspirated horsepower. That's a better power-to-weight ratio than most sports cars under $60,000. Companies like K Miata, K Power, and Ballad Sports offer complete K24 swap kits, plug-and-play solutions with engine mounts, wiring harnesses, ECU programming, everything you need. The K24 swap has become so refined that it's actually easier than many factory engine installations. The aftermarket has spent 20 years perfecting what Honda never officially supported. And prices reflect the demand. A good K24A2 engine sells for $1,500 to $2,500. A complete running K24A2 with transmission is $3,000 to $4,000. That's affordable performance. Compare that to a K20A Type R at $5,000 to $8,000. Or a Honda B18C at $3,000 to $5,000. The K24 offers more power potential for less money. The 400 horsepower club. By the late 2000s, naturally aspirated K24 builds had reached a peak that seemed impossible a decade earlier. Multiple builders had cracked 400 horsepower naturally aspirated. 400 horsepower from 2.4 liters, naturally aspirated. That's 167 horsepower per liter, from a Honda engine that started life making 160 horsepower in an Accord. These builds required serious money, $25,000 to $35,000 in engine work alone. Custom everything, billet cranks, titanium rods, exotic cam profiles, individual throttle bodies, dry sump oiling, built to tolerances tighter than factory specifications. But they proved something important. The K24's architecture, the basic design Honda created in 2000, was capable of performance that rivaled dedicated race engines. And with turbocharging, the sky was the limit. 4-digit horsepower K24s exist. They're expensive and not streetable, but they exist. Proof that Honda's family car engine can compete with anything when properly developed. What Honda won't admit. Today, when journalists ask Honda about the K24, they get generic responses. The K24 was an important engine in our lineup. It provided strong torques and reliability for millions of customers. No mention of its performance potential. No acknowledgement of the thriving enthusiast community. Nothing about the fact that people are making 400 plus horsepower naturally aspirated from Honda's Accord engine. But Talk to retired Honda engineers, and you hear a different story. "We knew what the K24 could do," one engineer admitted. "We tested it extensively. We knew it could make 280 plus horsepower, naturally aspirated with the right parts. We knew it could handle significant boost. We documented all of it. But corporate didn't want a performance K24. They wanted the K20 to be the performance engine and the K24 to be the torque engine. Clear product differentiation, no overlap. So we built an engine capable of 400 plus horsepower and told customers it made 160. And then we acted surprised when enthusiasts figured out what we'd hidden." Another engineer was more philosophical. "The K24 is proof that Honda still knows how to build great engines, but it's also proof that we don't know what to do with them anymore. We build capability and then deliberately don't use it. That's not engineering, that's corporate politics." The question Honda can't answer. Here's what keeps me thinking. If the K24 was just a family car engine, why has it become one of the most successful swap motors in history? Why are people paying $25,000 to build 400 horsepower, naturally aspirated K24s when they could just buy a modern turbocharged car? Because the K24 represents something modern engines don't. It's the last of the truly over-engineered Honda motors, built when Honda still designed engines with massive safety margins and obsessive attention to detail. The K24 is what happens when you ask Honda engineers to build a basic engine, and they can't help but make it excellent anyway. Even when corporate doesn't want excellence, just adequacy, the engineering culture couldn't accept anything less than overbuilt. And here's the bigger question. What if Honda had embraced the K24's potential? What if they'd built a Civic Type S with a 280 horsepower, naturally aspirated K24? Or a turbocharged variant making 350 plus? Would Honda's performance reputation be stronger? Would they own the sport compact market like they did in the 1990s? Drop your take in the comments. Should Honda have built a high-performance K24? Or was limiting it the smart move to protect their product lineup? And here's what I really want to know. The K24 is still available in some markets in naturally aspirated form. If Honda turbocharged it tomorrow with modern tech and put it in a lightweight sports car making 350 horsepower, would you buy it? Because maybe that's the real tragedy of the K24. Honda built an engine with limitless potential, then spent 20 years pretending that potential didn't exist, all to protect product segmentation and V6 sales. The aftermarket proved what the K24 could be. 400 horsepower naturally aspirated, 800 horsepower with boost, reliable, efficient, incredible. And Honda just watched, let the aftermarket capture all the profit, all the enthusiasm, all the innovation. The K24 was supposed to be boring, but it refused to be boring. It insisted on being great despite Honda's best efforts to make it ordinary. Maybe that's the most Honda thing about it. Even when told to be mediocre, Honda engineering couldn't accept anything less than excellent. They built more capability than required, more strength than needed, more potential than wanted. And enthusiasts found it, unlocked it, proved it. This is JDM Engine Archive. The K24 is still in production in some markets, still making just 180 to 200 horsepower, still hiding 400 horsepower potential underneath conservative tuning. Honda built a sleeper engine, then put it to sleep, but enthusiasts woke it up, and it's been screaming ever since. Catch you next time.